Hi guys, so Ian Collins, who's a Brexiteer, doesn't seem to understand Scottish independence or the Scottish people because he tries to paint the SNP and the Scottish independence movements as anti-English. Well, all they care about is leaving the UK because they don't like England and they don't like the English. This couldn't be further from the truth, because a lot of English people in the north of England in particular are supportive of Scottish independence, and many would be welcomed to live in Scotland if they decided to do that. So if Scotland was anti-English, why would they be welcoming the English to move to Scotland? It doesn't make any sense. Now, what he's doing is he's confusing anti-Westminster with anti-England. But because he's a Brexiteer, of course he would do that. So let's hear what he had to say.
And I've always found the argument a bit, even before Brexit, I thought the argument was a bit strange that the Scottish nationalists, in particular Nicola Sturgeon, and prior to her, Mr. Salmon, would often make this point about how do they know, that phrase, down there in Westminster, how do they know down there in Westminster what is going on up here?
What he's talking about, okay, when they talk about down there, they're talking about in two ways. They're talking about geographically, it's far away from Scotland. And culturally, it's far away from Scotland. Like, if you look at the makeup of people in Westminster, a sizable number of them, especially on the conservative side, you know, are private school educated. How can I put this kindly? Distant from the lives of ordinary people. You know, far from the lives of ordinary people. You know, people who went to Eton don't really understand the trials and tribulations of ordinary people. They don't understand what it's like to struggle to get to the end of the week or the end of the month, to pay bills, to send your kids to school. They don't really understand those things. And, you know, and whether you're a Conservative supporter or a Labour supporter, I think you would agree with me that the people in Westminster, you know, who went to private schools, Eton, for example, they're not very representative of the public at large.
Exactly the same claim somebody in Cornwall could make, by the way. You know, it's just a distant, wherever the capital city is.
Actually, no, it's not exactly the same, because there is a difference between Cornwall and Scotland. There's a cultural difference. And look, we can't get away from this. The fact that Westminster is anti-Scottish. And especially this government, which was anti-devolution. Now, why would the Conservative Party be anti-devolution? Why were they against Scotland becoming a devolved power? Because they don't like the Scots. They've never liked the Scots. They have treated the Scots as fools. You can look at some of the propaganda from the last century. They're in the same way that the Conservative Party, the Conservatives in England, treated the Irish as a lesser people. Now, you can disagree with me on that, but if you go to Scotland and you ask people in Scotland, even people who support the Conservative Party, I think if you dug deep enough, they would agree with me.
Sure to get a royal pounding every now and again by dint of its very existence. That's just kind of how it is. What do they know down there in Westminster about how to run things up here in Scotland seemed to be the thing. But quite happy to defer to more of a bureaucratic mandate from Brussels.
And this is the crux of the problem here, that Brexiteers don't seem to understand, or unionists don't seem to understand. Now, once again, I don't know if Ian Collins doesn't understand this or he's pretending not to understand this. Why would Scotland leave the UK and want to join the European Union? Think about that for a moment. Now, if you're a Brexiteer or a unionist, you say, well, that doesn't make any sense. We're treated as equals. Like the Scots and Westminster are treated as equals. And when you become a member of the European Union, you're a lesser power. It's actually the opposite. The Scots are treated as a lesser people in the United Kingdom. And if you don't believe me, look at what happens in Westminster when a member of the SNP asks a question. It's completely ignored. They're treated with contempt. Now you can say, well, that's because it's the SNP. But the SNP are representing the people of Scotland. So whether you agree or disagree with the SNP MP, you should treat the people who put that person there with respect by answering the bloody question. But they don't. They treat them with complete contempt. And you will see this, there's a slight difference with how they treat members of the Labour Party in England with members of the SNP in Scotland. They treat both with contempt, but there is a bit more contempt when a member of the SNP is asking a question. Now, think about it for a moment. Scotland wants to become a member of the European Union. Now, for a Brexiteer, this doesn't make any sense. Take a step back. If Scotland becomes a member of the European Union, it's treated in the same way as Ireland is treated as a member of the European Union. It's treated in the same way as Luxembourg is treated as a member of the European Union, or Belgium, or France, or Germany. Now, those countries have different amounts of power, but they're treated with respect. That is the difference. They're treated as an equal. Yes, some countries are bigger, they have more power, but within the European Union, there is mutual respect. And that doesn't exist in the United Kingdom. There isn't respect for the Scots. There isn't respect for the Scottish Parliament. Brexiteers are trying to paint a picture as, the United Kingdom. Westminster treats Scotland with respect, and Scotland should treat Westminster with respect, but it doesn't work like that. Why should Scotland, who are treated as a lesser in the United Kingdom, not want to be treated as an equal in the European Union?
Over Westminster, of course, it was never, when it comes to the Scottish nationalists, an issue about real independence or the intelligent arguments about breaking away from the Union. This was just basically an anti-English thing.
No, it's not an anti-English thing, once again, because Scotland have never said we don't want any English people here. It's an anti-Westminster, and he's trying to paint it as an anti-English thing. And of course, as we're getting closer to the election in May, this rhetoric is going to get ramped up. This is going to get worse and worse. The anti-Scottish rhetoric is going to get worse. This is anti-Scottish rhetoric. Basically, the Scots should be content with what they have. We're in the UK. Like it or lump it. Why would you want to join some bureaucratic nightmare in Europe where you would be treated as an equal? Why can't you be treated as a second-class citizen instead in the UK? I know people would disagree with me. No, Scotland is not treated as a second-class citizen. If you don't believe me, go to Scotland and ask the people in Scotland, are you treated as a second-class citizen? By Westminster, not by the English. You have to separate the two. This is not English. He's trying to paint it as an anti-English sentiment, anti-English issue. This is not an anti-English issue. This is an anti-Westminster issue. Westminster treats Scotland with contempt. The Conservative Party treats, and they are the government at the moment, they treat Scotland with contempt. What did Boris Johnson himself say about devolution? It's a disaster. The Labour Party brought in devolution. The Conservative Party were against it. In the same way the Conservative Party were against the NHS, but that's a different issue.
That fight has been at play for hundreds of years. We know that, and the SNP make no bones about it. They are supremely uncomfortable with their status as being part of a union, and they're...
Stop calling it a union, because it's not really a union. Yes, it's a union in name, but a union is where there are equal partners. Scotland is not an equal partner. Now, you can try and say, yes, they are. We can argue over whether... But I don't see it as an equal partner. Look at the way Westminster treats members of the SNP when they ask questions in Parliament, for example. Scotland doesn't have all the powers that Westminster have. They're not two equals here. One has all the power and another has some of the power. Powers are devolved, okay? Westminster can overrule.
Their aim, their life's work would be to get us out of such a scenario. And it's interesting that, and they get away with this very easily. I mean, the whole COVID thing. I mean, the COVID thing is fascinating. And I'll say this for the umpteenth time. How Nicola Sturgeon, who has incredible powers over all manner of things, like travel and health and all sorts of things that would happen in Scotland, how she's seen her star rise under COVID. And Johnson's, quite correctly, has gone down the pan.
Why do you think... He's asking this question, but he's not actually thinking about why is Nicola Sturgeon respected? Because she speaks to the people. She treats them with respect. Boris Johnson treats the public with contempt. He avoided the issue. Nicola Sturgeon said we need to deal with this issue. She was honest with the people. Now, let me lay my cards on the table. I'm a supporter of Nicola Sturgeon. But look at the polling. Even people in England think that Nicola Sturgeon did a better job than Boris Johnson. You know, if you have a leader in a country who appears human, who doesn't try to trick the public into doing something, doesn't try to confuse the public, doesn't apologize. Apologize, like when she made a mistake when it came to the exams. There was an issue with exams. She came out and apologized. Boris Johnson has never apologized. Boris Johnson's government never apologized. And I've said this before. If a politician comes out and apologizes and says, look, we messed up, I'm sorry. We made mistakes, we're trying to fix it. The public will, on the whole, I think, not everyone, but on the whole, on the most part, they will acknowledge that and say, yes, let's move on from that problem. Let's move on from that mistake. Let's try and fix it. But when the government say, no, we never made any mistakes, it was the public's fault, it was the Labour Party's fault, the opposition's fault, it was someone else's fault, it was the EU's fault, it was everyone else's fault, instead of taking responsibility for their own mistakes, then of course you're not going to trust them. If Boris Johnson is saying, you know, it's okay for my chief advisor to drive 500 miles up the road to, you know, with his wife and children when they've tested positive, but you can't leave your home, what sort of feeling does that create? How can you build trust with the public if you're acting like that? You can't. And Nicola Sturgeon, when she made mistakes, she apologized, but she also appears more human. And she seems concerned about her citizens. Boris Johnson doesn't give a crap about anyone who's not called Boris Johnson. And that seeds a feeling of loss with the public. The public don't feel like the government care about them. The public don't feel that the government are looking out for them. And wouldn't you prefer to live in a state, in an independent country, if that's the case, where the government cared about you, than being part of a union where the government doesn't give a crap about you? I know which I would prefer. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?